public voices of apologists for Islam display complete ignorance of Islamic hatred for the Jewish people, a hatred that has been a part of Islam ever since the Jews rejected Muhammad's religion 1400 years ago. Denial of this Islamic hatred requires ignoring the historical record and present-day reality of Islam. In the Middle East, leaders of entire nation-states vow to kill all the Jews and to drive the Jews into the sea. Had the Jews harbored the same hatred and ambition in regard to their neighbors, these Arab states would have been reduced to smoking ruins decades ago. Some try to blame this hatred on Zionism, and some non-Muslims have even deluded themselves into believing that somehow, if the Jews were driven off the land that God gave them, the Muslims would suddenly become peaceful. But it certainly hasn't been the result of any of the Western powers' sellout of Israel so far. How is Zionism the reason for the Islamic slaughter of 400,000 to 2 million in the Sudan alone, not to mention Nigeria and the rest of northern Africa? The Saudis didn't even officially outlaw enslaving Africans until 1962, though slavery still goes on in Islamic Africa today. What does Zionism have to do with 12,000 deadly terror attacks around the world just since 9/11, as reported on the religionofpeace.com website? Research the history of Israel in the early 19th century. One scant piece I found in A History of the Jews, Paul Johnson writes, between 1827 and 1839, largely through British efforts, the population of Jerusalem rose from 550 to 5,500, and in all Palestine it topped 10,000, the real beginning of the Jewish return to the Promised Land. It's obvious that nobody had an interest in this area that had been decimated and desolated by 1,200 years of Islam. It was then the enterprise and hard work of the Jews that rebuilt it, and their employment of the Arabs that increased population growth alongside. I exposed Ahmad Deedat's invented Bible verse that he then went on to suggest prove that Islam is not Antichrist. And in that same video, he concluded with the following.
I said, why don't you look at your own man? You know, Hitler, who was he? Christian. Mussolini, who was he? Christian. Talk about them. Look.
Were Hitler and Mussolini really Christians? Thou shalt love thy Lord God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. Is Hitler's genocide an expression of love for Jews? By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. Are Christians charged to kill their enemies? But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was Hitler's expression one of God's love shining through him? Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, knoweth not God, for God is love. So what does that say about Muslims and their apologists that hate Jews that happen to live in Israel? Is anyone really willing to believe that even Deedat bought into what he was saying? It would, however, be consistent with his fake Bible verse and general sophist antics. That some popes consign men to unchristian behavior does not excuse them either. If any Catholics wish to suggest the imperialism of the Crusades or any Roman Catholic Church genocide was Christian, please join us in the Ecclesia Forum at brotherpete.com and explain it in the Roman Catholic section. Since Islam is generally the opposite of Christianity, should we really be surprised when we read in the Hadith, Jews will hide behind a rockin' tree, and the rockin' tree will say, O servant of Allah, O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. The purpose of the Hadith is to help Muslims learn how to be more like their prophet. Some Muslims will actually try to excuse this Hadith away as a matter of historical context. But what possible context could justify supporting a call to slaughter on the basis of ethnicity? Not surprisingly then, with Islam as the perfect fit for Nazi Germany, Hitler and the Islamic Mufti of Jerusalem joined hands in World War II to further their shared ambition of genocide of the Jewish people. Do a YouTube search, Hitler Mufti Jerusalem. following are excerpts from the video Hitler, the Mufti of Jerusalem and Modern Islamo-Nazism. June 1941, the Wehrmacht attacks the Soviet Union. For Hitler, the center of the Jewish world conspiracy. From there, he intends to push further forward to the Middle East. For this plan, Hitler finds an ally in the Arab world. The Fuhrer received the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, one of the most influential men within Arab nationalism. Cooperation of many years between Hitler and the Grand Mufti takes off. Both have the same enemy, the Jews. The Mufti calls for holy war under the swastika. He takes the lead of the Bosnian SS division called Hanzar. In 1944, Berlin perishes under Allied bombardment. Nazis get in the remote spa of Eupen in Saxony, secure place for the Mufti to hide. In 1945, Hitler's Mufti elopes. He travels unharmed to Cairo and goes on spreading hate against Jews. The Egypt of the Revolution in the 15th is, under the Egyptian President Nasser, a bolt hole for German Nazis. Unlike Johannes van Leers, one of the most odious NS propagandists. According to until lately unknown CIA documents show Leers had been head of Odessa, the infamous organization of former members of the SS. According to the CIA, it was the Mufti who, of all people, made Leers convert to Islam. Until his death, the Mufti never had to answer for his Jew hatred. He has preached during all those years that there is a global Jewish conspiracy and that Jews are an inferior category of people. The mental poison spread by the Mufti is effective even today. For example, in a bookshop in Cairo, we find Hitler's Mein Kampf, next to piles of anti-Semitic global conspiracy literature, including the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. God bless Hitler, too, are finding their way into the news. This means be prepared for the real Holocaust. Almost like Iran's president who goes on denying the Holocaust and who has a Lebanese Hezbollah dangling from his strings. Especially repulsive, the TV channel the Lebanese Hezbollah even broadcast a dramatization of the unspeakable protocols. Today, racial anti-Semitism is established as a distinct ideology. This is also contained in the charter of the radical Palestinian government party Hamas. In this charter, Hamas relies, of all things, on the anti-Jewish protocols. Exactly like Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. Thus, a circle is closed which started with the pact between Adolf Hitler and the Mufti. Bear in mind that the Mufti of Jerusalem's perfect Islamic partnership with Hitler and the Nazis occurred before Jerusalem ever became an independent state in 1948. Islam is simply devoted to genocide of Jews. Apparently 2,500 years wasn't enough time spent in persecution of the Jews. They can't even be left alone in the land that God gave them. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. But then it would seem that this hatred was prophesied. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Pictured as the seed of the Islamic empire, leopard, bear, lion, beast. This will be concluded in part 2. For those in the grip of Islam, please visit islamandthetruth.com for an introduction to the Gospels and israelandbibleprophecy.com for the text version of this video. And please join us in the Ecclesia Forum for discussion at brotherpete.com/index.php.